I've never said I'm a perfect person.
Washington drowning in snake oil salesman, and I'm going to run him out, dagnabbit.
You're living at a time of extremism, a time of revolution, a time when there's got to be a change.
The working man. You ever heard of work? You know what work is?
It don't take much strength to pull a trigger, but try and get up every morning, day after day, and work for a living. Let's see him try that.
And I, for one, will join in with anyone, don't care what color you are, as long as you want to change this miserable condition that exists on this earth.
Do you really think you have a chance against us, Mr. Cowboy?
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
From Chicago, Illinois, this is the Worker Power Hour, the only podcast where you're getting the 99% working class perspective 100% of the time, from the headlines to the front lines. This episode was recorded on October 28th, 2017. I'm your host, Dave Schneider, and I'm joined here with my co-host, Dustin Ponder.
Good evening, everybody.
And we have a very special co-host here for the first half of this episode. Kaz Schwerdtfeger is a driver, package driver for UPS out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and he's sitting in on the Worker Power Hour today to kind of riff on some of the issues of the day at the TDU convention.
What's up, everybody?
So we're up here, major gathering of the most militant, badass Teamsters in the country at the Teamsters for a Democratic Union convention. It's been one hell of a weekend, and we have a ton of interviews, a lot of good content that's going to keep you powered through the work week. This is the first part of a two-parter that we're going to be releasing out of the convention. And in the second half of the show, I'm telling you all, you need to stick around for this. We have the baddest guest ever.
Oh, we managed to land the man in the Teamsters Union, Fred Zuckerman, the president of Teamsters Local 89, the head of the Teamsters United movement, and God damn it, God willing, the future president of the entire International Brotherhood of Teamsters.
Yeah. And he came damn close to beating James Hoffa Jr. last year.
It's about 6,000 votes, right?
6,000 votes made the difference. Fred Zuckerman he's got that vision that we badly need in the labor movement, much less in the Teamsters. We badly need that, and you guys are going to get a full scope of that in the interview.
And our listeners, we know now that he is the biggest name in the Teamsters. We kind of got a lame duck president, but it's for good reason. He is a union militant, knowledgeable, and this interview, I think, is just going to blow away kind of anything we've done thus far. So really excited for that. But first, we got a little segment we like to call Headlines and Frontlines.
It's our keynote segment, folks. Each week we pick out a couple of stories. We only have time for one or two today. One ripped from the headlines, the big stories out of Washington, Wall Street, from around the world. And one from the front lines of the struggle that feature working people fighting back. We bring these to you and then kind of riff on them and give you a working class perspective on the issues of the day. So, Dustin, why don't you lay out what our headline of the week is?
Oh, boy, it's a topic we like to talk about a lot. But our headline is a news story might have caught some of our listeners' attention. It's about the new Amazon Key service. It's a service where Amazon, you pay them $300 to install a system in your house. So that their Uberized Amazon drivers can open your house and deliver packages inside your home.
Inside the door, yeah. So I was listening to this shit. So online, I was reading that Amazon wants you to install a video camera pointing at your door so that, in case the Amazon driver comes in, he's not going to rummage through your stuff or go walk around the house or, steal anything out of it, because there's a camera that turns on the minute he opens the door, and then he delivers your package there. Because, it makes a huge difference. But if it's on one side of the door versus the other, it's worth paying $300 for, don't you think?
Well, absolutely, man. Strangers in your home is the American dream, right?
That's what this country was founded on, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, and Kaz, this should be a unique perspective for you as somebody who goes out and delivers on a route on a daily basis. Can you imagine, if you were told to go and put this inside people's houses? Can you maybe tell our listeners some of the stories you've had or interactions?
Americans are a funny people, and I don't know if I'd want to be inside of every single person's home that I deliver a package to, to be honest there. I think part of it is the idea that, who does this service really cater to?
Yeah.
It caters to people who are used to coming, having strangers come and go in their homes all the time, and they feel totally comfortable with that because they hire these people every day. But like we all know, the average American, average American neighborhood is not the neighborhood in which people feel safe having a stranger in, and many drivers, like myself included, deliver to places that, quite frankly, that's a very dangerous proposition going into somebody's house, especially after dark.
Yeah, that is pretty remarkable when you really break it down. It's like, yeah, if you think about the uber rich in the United States, these people who just have boatloads of money, think about it. They got people in there taking care of their kids. They got folks, coming and going cleaning because they, have so much money. They essentially hire people to do all the shit that we all have to do for free, for our own homes. And it's like, yeah, you pay somebody to wipe your ass. You can just as soon pay an Amazon driver to come on in and, deliver a package.
And it's just terrible optics, man. Like, Kaz brings up an amazing point, is that from a worker safety perspective, it's a nightmare. Nobody who's doing this job wants to be going into a stranger's house. I mean, UPS drivers, when I did seasonal stuff, you're worried about dog bites. People got animals, and like, it's just introducing a whole safety element not only to the worker and then also to the consumer, because we look at how Amazon's running their business and this Uberization of things, and it's like, you got Amazon drivers who are in like plain clothes now. They're driving up in their own personal car.
Unmarked white vans.
Yeah.
Yeah. With, free candy written on the side,
Right.
I heard you delivered a package. Like, I mean, there's a.
And let's be honest. There's like some really. I mean, rich people are weird. Rich people are fucking weird. They've all got like something kind of strange going on, a little off. Could you imagine delivering a package to John Podesta's house? Hillary Clinton's campaign manager. He's got all this fucking disgusting artwork. He's like, you want to drink my blood in the back before you leave?
I mean, it's Halloween. They're coming out with the remake of Saw. I mean, you're gonna go in and you're gonna get like jigsawed by like John Wayne Gacy. Like,
oh man,
Kaz, you want to play a game?
No, I don't.
No, I want to get back to
I'd back
home.
Oh man, our listeners, if you're followers of The Onion, you should Google, look up on The Onion. There's an article that says popular new Amazon service just comes to your house and kills you.
And it's an Amazon worker holding a silenced, PP7 out of GoldenEye, holding this guy hostage.
Well, and it's not that far off. It's kind of funny. We mentioned this before with Amazon, but Amazon has hundreds of million dollar contracts with the CIA. So now you're giving them access to your home. You got that Alexa speaker, which basically is like a wiretap in the homes of millions of Americans. I mean, it's kind of like this nightmare dystopic vision for the future of America.
And that's honestly what I don't get about the whole thing is like, I guess for the super rich, they honestly don't care if somebody has access to their home or that it's in some computer database stored away. Because honestly, they know the government serves them. At the bottom line is that the U.S. government works in service of the rich. They don't worry about stuff like wiretapping or the fact that the government collects everybody's data. They don't have to worry about it because guess what? The super rich are the ones in this country who control the government, and they're going to benefit from it every day of the week. They're not going to be under repression. Poor people will be, though.
Right, and in terms of service, right? I mean, what actually working class people get from Amazon, UPS, and other kinds of services. What you get is access points, and you get what are actually just basically locked steel boxes 25 blocks from your house that if you don't have a car, good luck getting your package,
Exactly.
Yeah, so talk about that for a second, actually, Kaz, because that's a big change that's happened even in the last 2-3 years at UPS. It used to be pretty much everything that you were delivering as a package car driver. I mean, I guess you'd have condos and apartment complexes where you drop off a bunch of stops and mailboxes. But Amazon now has installed these lockers. What's that like? What kind of effect does that have on working Teamsters?
Well, what it is it's an attempt by the company to save profits by pushing what used to be service that was expected of customers onto the customers themselves, where actually they have to provide some of the work in order to get their own packages, right?
So you pay the buck, drive out to a locker yeah.
I don't even understand how this is something that they can do. How come there isn't a class action lawsuit? If there was a company that said, hey, I got a sandwich for you, but you weren't really here when you said you were going to be here at 2:30, so it's about 15 blocks away and you can go get it, but you still have to pay the whole amount.
I mean, pretty soon, I mean, yeah, you stretch the analogy. It's like, I got a sandwich in the back. The only thing is you have to make it. You know?
Right.
It's just,
can you imagine? Soon we'll be paying to go in and work at UPS. It's the new America, everybody. The sharing economy.
You know, it's really breathtaking. So, you know, I want to stay on this kind of UPS and Amazon bit a little bit, but I think it's a good point to transition into our Frontline segment, which is, Kaz, we're up here at the Teamsters for a Democratic Union convention. This is, you know, I actually, you know what, I'm going to let you take this away as somebody who's been, you know, active in the Teamsters longer than I have. Like, you know, what exactly is TDU? If you were going to explain this convention, its significance to people who aren't necessarily in our union, what, you know, I mean, what's the gist of it?
Well, absolutely. So Teamsters for a Democratic Union is a reform caucus within the union. So what it is it's activists and militants and you know, regular working people who are Teamsters from around the country come together to talk about issues involving the Teamsters, fighting for a better contract, and fighting against wage concessions and other kinds of things that happen. You know, as a young Teamster, this is one of the places that I first went to help kind of orient myself in the world of fighting for better change in a union environment. You know, so I would say in a nutshell, it's an organization for those kinds of people, for people that want to make change from the shop floor perspective.
Yeah, and you really see the impact that that's been able to have. I mean, like we said at the start of the show, Fred Zuckerman, who was running against our sellout, you know, completely cowardly, weak leader, James Hoffa Jr., you know,
and the machine he built. You know?
The entire machine of corruption of all these local union officials that just sell out to him. Like Teamsters United, which was powered in large part by TDU militants, okay? That came within just spitting distance of toppling the Hoffa machine entirely. And they actually won in the southern region of the Teamsters in the central states.
And what's always stood out to me about Teamsters for a Democratic Union, and really if you're in any union out there, you should be aiming to build something similar to TDU, a caucus of fighters and militants. And when I come to this conference, it reminds me constantly, this is what a union should be. It should be people, I mean, we are all like brothers and sisters here. You're with people that, just like you, are slinging boxes, driving trucks, you know, not people who are pulling $100,000 a year salaries and are in conflict with the workers themselves. And it's a beautiful thing to see, man. We got radio shows here. We got all kinds of rank and file podcasts, people getting involved and stepping up and taking charge and, you know, showing that it's not, the union is not a building. It's not an individual. It's all of us working together. It's true solidarity. It's us sharing our knowledge and bringing up our brothers and sisters around us. And it's been amazing so far.
Right. I mean, it's great to be in a room full of people who, just like yourself, you know, are not afraid to stand up to the boss, right? Especially in an environment you're in where they're, you know, you have coworkers all around you that say, hey, look, man, I just want to go home. I don't want to go out and flyer for some shit. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. To be in a room full of people that are like, no, I'm here for this, and I want to help those brothers and sisters realize and see the light that we actually have to go out there to make that kind of change. You know?
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's incredible. I'll say this, you know, I got elected union steward about 3 years ago out of my local, and, you know, I learned pretty much, I mean, you know, our local did a training, which was great, and you pick up a lot from experience, but calling people like Kaz, calling other folks that I know in TDU, you know, militants all over the country, these folks, you know, have that kind of experience that really, I think, has made me into, you know, being the shop steward I am today.
Yeah.
And, you know, I continue to grow from it. So, you know, Kaz, a couple of things. We've, you know, at this convention, there have been a number of hot topics. I think this is, you know, this is the third or fourth one I've been to. I can't remember. This is most certainly the biggest contingent of retirees I've seen ever at a TDU convention. And, of course, these folks are really upset, you know, because rightfully so, Wall Street is completely annihilated the pension system for a lot of Teamsters around this country. They're facing big, massive, deep cuts. You know, we talked to Fred Zuckerman a little bit about this, but, you know, what's kind of stood out to you at the convention as far as some of the big issues people are talking about?
Well, I mean, I think the big picture issues are Hoffa, the election, summing up, you know, our experiences from the last election, and then looking forward, the UPS contract looms large. I know your guys' show, which I'm a big fan of. I listen to it while I'm working, driving my truck. Whenever it comes out.
Hell yeah.
That's an issue that people talk about constantly. And as a union steward myself, for package car drivers, I hear from the young guys at work, they're dealing with overwork, and they want to know about their paycheck. You talk to the old guys at work, and they want to know about their pension. Luckily, in my local, our pension's okay, but for millions and millions of people out there, at least hundreds of thousands, they're in a much different situation. I think there's a lot of people on there for that.
Well, can I ask you? We talk about what to do with Zuckerman a little bit later in our interview, but what's going on the ground in 344? How are your guys preparing for the contract? How's the local preparing? What do you think we should be doing as rank and file workers and fighters to get ready and get on top of this thing?
Well, it starts with a conversation, and I will say this, more than I've ever seen before, there's young drivers and I deal mostly with package car drivers that are having conversations, on their own, researching stuff on their own and bringing it to the table and want to ask questions more than ever before. The Teamsters contract in the past has had an environment where quite literally it was rammed down our throats, 5 years ago, where they just simply implemented it. And I think that, you have to remember that 7 out of 10 of the UPS Teamsters voted against the current administration and the people that are negotiating that contract. There are a lot of very upset people, and I think the main key is to keep people's eye on the prize as they try to navigate this thing coming up.
Well, and that I think that's a big point to draw out here is that, UPS Teamsters got shit on in the last contract, just in no uncertain terms. We had our health care cut, and UPS, my understanding, especially from talking to people up here, it's kind of fleshed it out. It's like, our health care was under attack last contract season, but they're coming for our pension this time around, big time, And I mean, we're not going to, under this kind of James Hoffa Jr. regime of continually selling out to corporate America, we're not going to see an international leadership that's willing to actually go, to the pavement fighting these folks and trying to win a decent contract. The only way that we're going to make any kind of a difference is if all the militants here and around the country hold these people accountable and, are able to build up essentially a credible strike threat. I mean, am I right about that?
Absolutely. And, that's the key. That's what I've been stressing with people. And, a lot of the Hoffa locals are trying to scare the members and turn them against people like us and be like, oh, these guys are trying to take you out on strike. But it's a real conversation. We got to go out and have it, and we got to have it in a mature way, not a way that is ridiculous, because we're talking about people's livelihoods, people with family. They got house payments, things like that. But we got to start saving now. We got to start educating guys on the past, what happened in 97, what's happened in strikes, what's a scab. These are conversations that need to be had in preparation of this contract battle.
I've got young guys that talk to me before we pull out in the mornings every day that they say, brother, I'm just ready to strike. And I'm like, and I look at him and I'm like, are you really? I'm like, over what? He goes, because fuck these people, Somebody told me that last week,
Hey,
it's amazing.
The anonymous working class hero of the week. Shouts out to that guy in 344.
Yeah,
you know who you are if you listen to this show, man.
Hell yeah, dude.
You know who you are. This Adonis who walks among us.
And I mean, for the young guys, I think we're a little bit more ready in it. It's time for our generation. The guys that have been there 5 or 6 years. I mean, Kaz, in the last contract, did you get hit with the 4-year progression? Are you in the 4-year progression?
Yep, I was one of the first people to have the 4-year progression in my local.
So explain the 4-year progression for our listeners here.
Okay, well, back in the day when life was good, you used to have a 30-day progression, and there was just simply one rate for any person that used to work at
So after 30 days, you go up to basically the standard pay rate you would have as a driver.
Right.
Yeah, which top rate now is like $36 an hour, just so our listeners know.
That's right, 36. And so, if we were in the 70s or so, or even earlier than that, it would be 30 days. You'd be hired on permanently, and you'd be hired on at the rate. Everyone gets the same pay.
Yeah.
Now what you have is it slowly went forward. And in the last concession, in the last contract 5 years ago, they went from a 3-year pay progression, where it took 3 years to get to that top rate. Now it's a 4 years to get to that
That's
top
breathtaking. Because that's money that's you are literally losing. You're doing the same labor as everybody else, and you are literally losing. I mean, because what? You start at 18 an hour, isn't that right?
18, you move up
75, yep.
Yeah.
It's
and
breathtaking.
literally, I mean, that concession that was given away while UPS was making record profits has cost you tens of thousands of dollars in your career.
Right, and you have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of UPS Teamsters that look around and they say, UPS is making record-breaking profits. Why aren't we seeing record-breaking contract improvements?
Exactly.
It's incredible. You know, I will say this. One thing that stood out at this convention, a lot of people talking about 97. Yeah. A lot of people talking about that 97 strike. And I don't think, you know, granted, you know, I've only been in for one contract cycle here. But from what everybody's saying, there is a feeling in the water here that we've got to embrace some of the militant tactics as a union that want us, you know, whatever we have in the past, if we have any hope in the future right now. So, you know, I definitely am very optimistic coming out of this conference. And honestly, I think for our listeners out there, this is an opportunity, even if you're not part of the Teamsters, zero in on this contract fight, because this is going to set the gold standard of every union contract, every labor standard around the country. It's the largest private sector union agreement in the U.S.
Yeah, exactly. And, well, that's going to wrap it up for this section of Headlines and Frontlines. In our second part, we're going to have Kaz and some other Teamsters on, so stick around, download that episode. But coming up next, we have the interview. Fred Zuckerman coming live from the Worker Power Hour, telling us the truth. It's an amazing interview, so everybody stick around.
Alarm clock ring on, phones are tripping, promises broken, yeah, jobs are leaving, and the sky is darkening, and the landlord's stepping, but the bus be splitting, and I won't be regretting, and there's no more jobs here, no more love here, no more room here for me, and there's no more jobs here, only misery here for me and my family, and I got my back up against the wall, and I got my back up against the wall. And no one hears a call, 'cause there's no one there at all. And I got my back up against the wall.
Welcome back, sisters and brothers. We're joined now by a very special guest. He's the president of Teamsters Local 89 out of Louisville, Kentucky, the largest local of UPS Teamsters in the country. He was a key leader in the 2013 Vote No on the UPS contract campaign, and last year, he ran for general president of our union on the most successful opposition slate in over 2 decades, Teamsters United, coming within a percentage of winning the presidency. There is no question today that he is the most powerful name in the Teamsters. Fred Zuckerman, it's a real honor to have you on the Worker Power Hour.
I appreciate being here.
All right, so Fred, let's just dive right in here. You know, last year you ran an exceptional campaign. We mobilized, I know at Jacksonville and Florida, we mobilized a ton of people behind the Teamsters United message, which was that we need to start fighting for good contracts for the members in the Teamsters and not just keep selling out to these companies time after time after time. You narrowly lost to Jim Hoffa, and your message tonight at the convention was we need to continue on this fight, especially with an eye towards this UPS contract that's coming up. So I guess my first question is, what do Teamsters out there need to hear as far as what should we be doing organizing on the shop floor to prepare for the fight that's coming next year?
Well, first of all, let me say this. I appreciate you guys right here. You guys, what you did in Jacksonville, what you did in Florida. It was people like you that put us over the top in the South to win those Central Region Vice President spots that we desperately needed, that we have now, and that are representing our membership. Going forward with the UPS contract, we know a few things. Number one, we've already been through the screening process and the two-man committee, and we know that the International Union has already given up.
Yeah.
They have given up a lot of the proposals that were very important to the UPS membership, such as harassment, 9/5s for the package car guys, health insurance, which is very important for the part-timers, the raises, and all those things. So we are going to have to mobilize and educate our members right now to make sure that they are educated, going through the process. If you remember the last UPS contract, the South was the first one to ratify their regional supplement. And they were sold a bill of goods that was nothing but a bunch of lies, particularly from Ken Wood, who negotiated it, said that the insurance is going to be better than the insurance you had. That was just a flat-out lie. Everybody knows that now. They said it was a good contract. It was laced with concessions, but they were sold it, and they voted it, and it passed. We have got to stop that type of reaction from the membership about getting into it late and relying on somebody that's going to lie to you to take their word whether or not it's a good contract. We have to educate the folks on each and every issue to make sure that they understand and they can evaluate that issue by themselves when they make that decision to vote, because they're not going to listen to you. The only thing that they're going to listen to is your vote.
That's right.
And if it continues to get voted down, look, I tell them this. I started my own personal vote no campaign tonight, right?
Yeah.
I did that because I am going to only vote yes when they demonstrate to me that we have a good contract.
That's right.
And absent that, they can consider me a no vote.
And on that note, Fred, talking about preparation and, having leverage in a contract campaign like this, something that stood out to me, and one of the reasons I personally am a huge supporter of you, you've talked about the strike and strike readiness and preparing the members to have the leverage when they sit down at the table. What do you think about Hoffa and the current Teamster regime and the kind of contract preparedness as far as education, as far as strike readiness that's going on, maybe now compared to a time like 97 or something when the actual strike took place? Would you do anything different?
Sure, I do a lot of things different. One of the things the Hoffa administration does, just like when they screen the proposals, they've got no strategy to win a good contract. When they screen the proposals, they had a stack that's, about this big, and they go through it and they say, well, this one's a good one, this one's a bad one, this one's a good one, this one's a bad one. And that's how they screen their proposals to have a final proposal to give UPS. There's no thought behind it. There's no strategic purpose. It's just a bunch of nothing. Now, I can tell you, I was around during the Carey days. And Ron Carey was actually very good at this, and the car haul contract is actually a very good example of what they did. Before Carey took office, the corporate parents of the car haul companies were double-breasting. What that means, they were spinning off non-union companies and competing against themselves, and that way they can compete for better prices, lower wages, and all that stuff. Something similar to what CF did with Conway. Okay? Same thing, something similar with what UPS is doing with UPS Logistics. Back during Carey's years in the early 90s, he negotiated, because it was part of his strategy to preserve work, he negotiated what's called a work preservation agreement in the car haul contract that prohibits a corporate parent from spinning off a company, from subcontracting, from having double-breasted companies, and they can't do it. That has preserved the car haul work over the years. This guy in Washington, this crazy old man up there, you know who I'm talking about. Not the other guy, this guy. Right?
Because there's a couple of them, let's be clear.
There's a couple of them. He just doesn't get putting a little bit of thought into the contract proposals to achieve a strategic goal. He doesn't get it. All he wants is 51% of the people to vote yes. And he'll lie to you, he'll deceive you, he'll do whatever it takes to get a contract passed, but he doesn't want to fight. That's what this guy's problem is. He doesn't want to fight.
So, Fred, one thing I've talked to a lot of my coworkers about, because I know for part-timers, and it really affects the packaged guys all the time at UPS, is this question of harassment. Right now, in the UPS contract, we have incredibly weak language. I've got this dirtbag supervisor who I've filed more grievances on this guy. Probably he's got a stack the size of the Holy Bible in his file, of grievances from me over the course of 4 years. And every time the local sits down with him and they say, don't do this again, and he does it again anyway. This is the same story package drivers get all across the country. Because there's no method of actual enforcement. There's no monetary enforcement. The company doesn't pay when they harass. And then, the local really just can suggest things, and then the company doesn't have to do anything. One thing that's been really incredible, I think, speaking to questions of vision, what contract will we like, is you proposed a different set of language that actually would give us some teeth, at the table with management to enforce anti-harassment language. Can you talk a little bit about that? Give people some perspective on what good anti-harassment language would look like in a contract.
Sure. So everybody knows what the problem is, right? The harassment is just out of control at UPS, and it's worse at some places rather than others. And the IBT just doesn't want to acknowledge it. They hear people say all the time, well, we're being harassed, for whatever reason. But, they just kind of turned a blind eye to it. What's important is that we've got a problem and we find a solution to the problem, okay? What you have to do is propose and achieve very strong language that puts an end to it. We're not interested in coming halfway. We're not interested in patting us on the backside and say, well, we're not going to let that happen again. It's got to stop.
That's right.
Right? It's just that simple. Some people think that, you can't propose striking a center if they continue to do it. Okay? We have language in the car haul contract that I negotiated that says that if they violate a grievance settlement, we have the right to strike them. Right? There's no reason why we can't do that. You can have a harassment grievance and try to put an end to it and achieve a resolution. And if they do it one more time, that's the end of it. We're tired of talking to you. We're not going to do it anymore. We're just going to put an end to it. I think the membership would support that.
I love it. It's old school too. I love it. That's the early days when labor was effective. Even before a lot of arbitration systems. In the very early days when our union, the Teamsters, was at the strongest, that was one of the solutions that the union used to great effect to settle a lot of their, early issues pre-arbitration. And I think it's a great idea.
Absolutely.
Well, it gets into that point too about a credible strike threat. I mean, it's like whether we strike or not. The point is the IBT isn't even prepared right now to strike. This is something, we talked, another thing I want to get your opinion on, but it kind of runs parallel to this. UPS is signaling very hard, in some places they're trying to implement this, of getting seasonal package drivers that are going to be using their own personal vehicles. It is truly the Uberization of UPS package delivery system. And Amazon's already done this. And UPS is clearly trying to implement the same system so that they can compete with the lower labor costs that Amazon can achieve. But this is the thing, is that, there's a lot of drivers out there who are outraged, but unless the union starts talking to people about, hey, you need to vote no on the contract, or, you need to be, really, they should just fight for a good contract. But unless we get out there and start talking to people, the union has not told folks, be prepared in the event of a strike. People aren't saving up money. They're not thinking about what it would mean to be out of work for 2 weeks. And, that if it comes to it that we vote no a couple of times and they go back to the table, this union leadership, I don't think they're even prepared for what would happen in that time.
The IBT is not going to take on a strike. It's just that simple. They don't want to dive into the strike fund. They don't want to take on a fight with UPS. They are just not willing to do that. Whatever we do, it's going to be up to the membership.
That's right.
Up to us to educate the membership, to make them aware of the things that can happen, to get prepared. Preparedness is a big deal, right? They have got to know that the contract expires August 1st of next year.
Yes.
And, the fight starts then, whether or not we get a good contract. Or we can just sit back and complain to each other and say, you know what, we just got another bad contract. I'm not willing to do that. I'm willing to make sure that we get a good contract. I know you guys are too.
Oh, yeah.
You guys fight your asses off down in Florida, and we all appreciate that. And you guys do a great job. You got a lot of energy, and we need to motivate more people into getting this done, getting the people together and getting it done.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you, I was in Kenwood's local the last time our contract came up, and something that really stuck out to me, no one was at the gates telling the rank and file members, here's what the proposals are, here's what's going on. And then elections, political elections came up, and they pulled people out on release time. And I just thought, granted, I believe unions should be involved in politics. We should be building up a working class party, but it's unconscionable that you're not going to the gates, because we all know in a lot of these Hoffa locals, not a lot of people go to the union meetings. And if you're not getting out to the gates, if you're not preparing people, if you're not educating them, we're going to be in some serious trouble. And then they use the threat of a strike as blackmail. I sat in Kenwood's local. People were outraged by the final proposals, and he says, well, vote it up or down. This is what I got. And, if we're paying people hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and that's the kind of leadership we're going to get, I mean, it's outrageous. And, it makes it a lot easier to work for a leader like Fred, who actually is putting proposals out there that our members can believe in. I mean, that's a hard thing, for part-timers. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that,
Well, like in Local 89, Fred, you represent, I think it's the largest Teamsters local representing UPS workers, period, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, and I mean, the Louisville hub is second to none. It is the largest in the UPS entire system. Now, you've been able to negotiate a whole lot better conditions for part-timers. I mean, I think you all have higher wages. I know you have more combo jobs and a better ability for part-timers to go into full-time. What does that take? I mean, obviously we know the IBT is not going to negotiate a good contract, but you all have been able to do something different locally. Talk a little bit about that kind of strategy, like what you all have done in 89 and what we can learn from it.
So strategy is all about leverage. You cannot go as deep as you want to go unless you have the leverage to back that up. Yeah. The air hub is the crown jewel of UPS. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of people there. One of the leverage points that we have is that they have exhausted the part-time employment ranks in our area. So that's the reason why we get all the school benefits, the college benefits, all those things. That's the reason why we have 1,500, 1,600 combo jobs inside there.
Incredible.
I mean, it's a big number.
Just so you know, folks, that's more combo jobs, which are full-time, high-paying jobs, the full-time pension, than in Jacksonville. Then we have part-time jobs in our hub.
That's incredible.
It's just astounding.
Yeah. So it's all about leverage, and it's all about how you use that leverage. Yeah. First you have to realize the leverage that you have. The second, you got to be smart enough to be able to use it. Right?
Without a doubt. Well, here's the other thing that y'all do in 89 that is, night and day difference from pretty much everything else we're seeing in the labor movement right now, which is that y'all roll up your sleeves and actually go out and organize new workers into the union. I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but I know that 89 pretty much is like at the leadership of the Teamsters as far as bringing in new workers, getting actual contracts for the people you organize, and getting decent contracts for folks. Right now in Jacksonville, we have 4 Amazon warehouses being built. Yeah. 2 of them are already up. There's 2 more to come. This is something that I talk about on the show all the time, is that Amazon workers need to be organized by the Teamsters at some point, just like FedEx workers have needed to be organized by the Teamsters. But there's been no vision from the leaders of the IBT to actually get out there and do it. They all are hung up on these legal fictions of FedEx drivers aren't classified as workers or whatever. And they do this patchwork job, to be able to paint this fiction, but they never actually organize people. What do we need to do as a union, especially looking at the monopoly power that Amazon's been able to put together, to actually ensure that we have a decent ability, to survive and continue to negotiate with UPS, which, let's be honest here, pretty soon, we as workers are going to have less leverage over UPS if Amazon is able to build up their own operations and direct business over there. What do we need to do as a union to get back to organizing workers and inspiring them to join the union?
That crazy old guy in Washington, you know the guy I'm talking about, he has never understood our business, our union, right? And how important it is to organize in core industries. He's just worried about numbers. And that's why he goes out and raids other unions like teachers and airlines and state workers and stuff like that, because typically that's easy pickings. But that's not organizing, that's union busting.
Yeah.
All you're
Yeah,
doing
it
is
is.
stealing from another union because they're upset about something, and you kind of sneak in the back door, you kind of slither in there, and then you steal their members and then bring them over here. That doesn't help, and I gotta say, everybody needs a union, but that doesn't help the members that we have in our union, particularly in UPS, particularly in our warehouse division, particularly in freight. Now, some of the failures that Hoff has had, and it only comes up at election time, is he says, well, we're organizing in freight. We're organizing XPO, which is the old Conway, and we're organizing FedEx.
Yeah.
Well, what's happened to them? You know, down in Miami, they organized XPO or Conway at the time, and they haven't had a contract in 3 years. Up in Connecticut, they just deserted the union. Ernie Soule, Local 701 in New Jersey, was just appointed the freight director. They had organized FedEx in his jurisdiction, and he just walked away from them two weeks ago, claimed disinterest in them, and walked away from them. Now, that's not getting the job done.
No.
You know, organizing core industries is very important in freight for our YRC people, for our ABF people. It keeps the wages up, it keeps the benefits up, conditions, and all that stuff. In warehouse, it's important, like in Amazon. Sooner or later, they are going to be a direct threat to UPS, right? And we have to organize them. In my local union, we have had an organizing campaign going on for 2 years at Amazon, which we're not letting up. It's very difficult. We don't have any support from the IBT. We're doing it on our own.
Unbelievable.
You know how big Amazon is, but that should be a priority to organize in these core industries that's going to boost up the members that we already have, rather than doing nothing and let them just go away.
And that's the real sad thing. You know, we've pressed our local union on this issue. We've talked about Amazon. We said, what's the plan? We're willing to help. You know, a lot of our part-time coworkers work at UPS and Amazon. Like my girlfriend's mom works at Amazon. We have a lot of members and a lot of working class people in our city either work at UPS or Amazon, and we have a lot of resources that are just going untapped. I know Dave and I have talked about, you know, let's use some of these part-timers, get them involved. If we can give them a stipend and make them salts like unions used to do back in the day, they would send in, you know, trained organizers to jumpstart those organizing
You could have
campaigns.
dues-paying members in Amazon today. In fact, we already do. We just don't organize with them. We don't do anything with those folks, you know?
Exactly right.
It's mind-blowing, you know. So, Fred, you know, I got just a couple more things I want to talk about. Kind of a shift of gears here. You know, a couple of months ago, actually, I guess it was only about a month ago, you know, Florida, Texas got hit with a couple of hurricanes. Puerto Rico got hit with a hurricane, and there was this fake news story that was going around saying that Teamsters were blocking aid from getting to Puerto Rico. It was completely fake. It was drummed up on some dark corner of the internet. I think you've been involved in sending relief down to Puerto Rico. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you made a trip down there, didn't you?
I went down there, I think it was October 6th. I went down there with 12 of my guys, yeah.
So, you know, I mean, this is the thing that is mind-blowing. I mean, you know, you see this kind of anti-union sentiment get drummed up from these idiots, you know, who, you know, aren't even reporting the right thing. Teamsters never went on strike.
And let's be clear, those are big corporations paying perceived idiots to put out this propaganda.
Exactly, you know, and I mean, when in reality, I know our local, Teamsters Local 25 out of Boston sent aid by a semi-full down to Jacksonville to help people. And your local's been involved. You actually went down to Puerto Rico. Talk a little bit about some of the relief aid. You know, I mean, because obviously we're seeing a lot of natural disasters right now, and I think unions have been on the forefront of trying to repair things and make things better for folks who've been devastated. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So anytime there's a disaster that affects anybody, particularly our members, we have a responsibility to help. No question about that. We helped in Texas. We helped in Florida. Puerto Rico is the worst disaster that I have ever seen. I went down there myself with 12 guys, Class A certified truck drivers, because that's what they had requested. That's what they needed. The island is a mess. When I went down there, they didn't have electric. They didn't have water. They didn't have roads to get to these villages all over the island. They didn't have any cell phone service. They didn't have any internet service. They're completely cut off from the world. And they needed help. The problem is that there was no coordination. There was some help getting there, but you couldn't get it out. And we became very frustrated because we were there to help and, not a lot was getting done. They still need help. That's going to be a long-term fix. I mean, these people are hurting today. One of the things that was going on is that you couldn't get outbound flights out because everybody was leaving the island. They're all going to Florida. I mean, you guys have probably seen the news reports about where are we going to put all these people. It is so bad in Puerto Rico, they can't stay there. They're looking for other places to go.
Oh, tons of people still don't have clean water.
This is gonna take a very, very long time to fix, and these people need help. They need a lot of help.
And that at the core is what the union's about. It's helping working class people. It's helping all of society. And for us in Florida, it's a big issue. There's been news reports actually that they're predicting that the Puerto Rican population is going to grow as large as the Cuban community, which is quite large in Florida. And I just think it's a credit. I think you guys in '89 that went down there and helped out. I know a lot of our Puerto Rican brothers and sisters in Florida. I know some very good brothers and sisters in New York who really appreciate that, and thanks.
So I got two more things I wanted to ask you about while we've got you here. One is about this pension crisis that we've got that has been underway. Look, right now the Treasury Department is still, talking about trying to make cuts to the Central States Pension Fund. That's going to affect just a tremendous amount of Teamsters. I think it's the largest multi-employer pension fund in the United States. Am I correct on that?
Second largest.
Second
now,
largest.
The Western Pension Fund is the largest, yeah.
So, this pension fund, Wall Street's gambled so much of this money away. We've got seniors, we've got retirees, people who are 80, 90 years old who are talking about facing cuts somewhere in the range of 40 to 60%. A lot of these folks, it's like trying to tell a 90-year-old Teamster retiree worked their whole life, you got to go get a job again, in order to supplement your income, or, good luck eating cat food for the rest of your life. This is just barbaric that this is what we're talking about in this country. You've been, I think, the most outspoken, one of the most outspoken leaders in the Teamsters that something needs to be done about this. These Teamsters should not have to pay the penalty for Wall Street's greed and their mismanagement of these pension funds. This crisis is going to be ongoing. What do we need to do to actually make something happen to shore up this pension fund? And I mean, how much responsibility does the IBT leadership bear in this crisis?
The first thing we need to do is get rid of that crazy old man up there in Washington.
Agreed.
You know which one I'm talking about, right? Look, this problem exists because that crazy old man in Washington hadn't done his job. For the past 17, 18 years that he has been in office, he has not organized anybody and put them in any pension funds that are going to support the funds. Yeah. The problem with all of these funds, and it's not only Central States, it's hundreds of funds. Central States just is the biggest. Yeah. That's why everybody's focused on Central States. The problem is they have more retirees than participants. And the participants continue to get smaller and smaller and smaller because that crazy old man in Washington is allowing companies to get out of the funds. He just allowed Kroger to get out September 16th.
I saw that.
Thousands of members. They negotiated them out. And we know what the problem is. The problem is we need participants to pay the bills, and he continues to allow people to get out while the retiree population gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
It's right? Like blowing a giant hole in the Titanic.
It's like 5 to 1 now. You have 5 retirees for every participant that's in there. Okay? Oh. So let's talk about some of the problems. Okay? If these funds go insolvent, the law says that those companies have to pay their withdrawal liability the very next day. You don't get a 20-year payment schedule like you could if you were just to withdraw. Mm-hmm. When they're insolvent, you got to pay. And you got to continue to pay the benefits, right? Mm-hmm. So what happens if one of them goes insolvent, say YRC or Central States, YRC goes insolvent also, right? They go into bankruptcy, but they also collapse the New England Fund, the New York fund, because those companies are in all of those funds. ABF is the same way. Jack Cooper Transport and Car Hauls the same way. We have grocery warehouses that are in multiple multi-employer funds, and on and on and on. In addition to that, local unions like mine that participates in Central States, and we have since the 1950s, would be required to make that payment the very next day too, right?
Wow.
We don't have that money, and no local union has that money to make the payment on a withdrawal liability the next day. You can't finance it, okay? So now local unions go insolvent. Now the Teamsters union is going insolvent because of all of this chain reaction.
It's a domino effect, yeah.
Because one fund goes into insolvency. It's a huge, huge problem. Additionally, the UPS contract that's coming up, UPS is like in 28 of these multi-employer funds, of which 27 of them are in the red zone or close to the red zone, right? Mm-hmm. This is going to be the toughest negotiations anybody has ever seen with UPS, only because of that fact.
Wow.
Because now that they have to figure out how to survive. Because if a fund goes insolvent, they're going to have to continue to pay into it, pay the withdrawal liability like everybody else, and pay into the funds. So they are going to use that during negotiations to figure out how to fix that problem.
And Dave and I listen to a lot of finance and Wall Street podcasts to understand what our enemy's thinking, and it is a hot topic. A lot of Wall Street people, they're like, the pension crisis is coming. All the pensions are up for grabs. There's no way they're going to be able to be paid under current circumstances, and you're either going to need a political solution, or you're just going to tell these people you're not going to be paid. And I'm telling folks, if you're a listener here right now and you have a pension, this is a battle you got to get involved in. If you're a current member and you want that pension when you're retired, you need to tune into this and pay attention, because it's going to be a national issue. It is for our retirees and for the fighters right now, but it's going to be front page news for everybody else.
Well, and I'll go a step further on that. What Fred said at the start, that we've got to throw out Jim Hoffa if we want to see some movement on this. I mean, let's go back for a second. Jim Hoffa was the one who let UPS pull out of Central States in the first place.
Yep.
UPS was paying into this pension fund. They made up just a huge percentage of it. I mean, almost half, I think. And by pulling that out, it destabilized the whole fund. Now, I mean, there were other problems, of course. I mean, entrusting this to Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan and, all these people who've essentially gambled with Teamsters money. But, we don't have anybody, even in our own union at the top, who's actually looking out for these funds and trying to make sure that they're solvent for the next generation. So, I mean, okay, so...
I mean, why would you? You can trade them for Playboy tickets,
Yeah, I mean, it's a good trade. Everybody's future. You get to go to a Super Bowl party.
Let me share this one thing with you, just to put it into perspective. Everybody knows that the Western Conference Pension Fund is stable. Yeah. I think they're 90% funded, high 80s, something like that. Do you know why that is?
Why?
58% of their participants is UPS.
Is that right? So they weren't allowed to pull out of the West.
Exactly right.
Wow.
See, and that's what happened to Central States. You pulled UPS out, it collapsed. 58% of the participants in the West, even part-timers, are in the Western Fund.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's breathtaking. So, I mean, we've obviously got to get involved in this fight. I mean, at a certain point, we're going to have to, probably get some. I mean, the federal government's going to have to step in. I mean, it's just a question of how much, when, and are we going to be able to force them to do that and actually not force Teamsters to take cuts, right? Isn't that kind of the end game here? I mean, what are we looking at?
Let me share this with you. I don't know what the end result is. I know that there's a couple bills out there. The retirees groups are jumping on this Sherrod Brown plan, which is really not a plan yet. It's not a bill. It's just kind of some thoughts where there's not going to be any cuts for them in Central States. I believe that's unrealistic. I mean, there's a $20 billion shortfall in Central States. They're going to have to make it up somehow, some way. The Tooth Fairy just ain't going to give you a bunch of money. I mean, these days everybody's looking for self-help, so something's going to happen. And as importantly, the actives are getting very nervous about what their $350 a week contribution to the fund is, what the value of that is, what it's getting them. Because we have actives now that are contributing $350 a week that are 35 years old that are being told, you're never going to get nothing. So they're saying, well, why do I even want to be in the fund? Why don't we get out of the fund? And that'll further collapse the funds, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a serious, serious problem that needs to be fixed.
Well, even when we look at organizing new workers, I mean, pensions have been a cornerstone of what unions have guaranteed working people in this country. It's part of the appeal of joining a union is that you have your retirement taken care of, and it's supposed to be secure. So if we don't have leaders who are willing to defend that gain that we fought for over generations, why are new people going to join the union? Why, what incentive do workers have to join when Jim Hoffa is selling the farm back to Wall Street?
I mean, why are you going to join a union if you're going to make low wages, have no pension, and have terrible health care? There's no reason to
be
make
harassed every day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
it's unbelievable. Fred, I got one last thing. I guess this is more a comment, but I am interested in your thoughts too. After the horror we saw in Charlottesville, you made, I think, the most principled statement I've seen out of any labor leader with regards to denouncing white supremacy, denouncing racism, and really calling on union militants and workplaces, union leaders, to take up that fight. And I think that is so essential because I've talked to union brothers and sisters at UPS who faced racism, faced harassment, from superiors, managers, supervisors. And, to see the union come out strongly on this, I think you released your statement before James Hoffa and his people put out, I think it took them almost a week before they put out anything, and it was a hell of a lot less strongly worded than yours. You've got a really diverse local in Louisville, Kentucky. I guess if you could talk for a minute, we're at a unique moment in this country. What should the role of union leaders be in combating racism, white supremacy?
You brought up the IBT's lack of a response for a week. They needed time to think about it. We don't need time to think about this. There's no room in our society, in our union or anywhere else, for racism, for hatred, for anything else like that. We need to stop that. As for leadership roles, we need to encourage that. We need to make sure that every day everybody understands what our position is, that there is no place in our society at all for that. It's got to stop. It's got to stop somewhere, and we, if we're the guys that got to stop it, we got to stop it.
That's right.
Damn straight.
And I know that means a lot. Our local's over 50% African American, and when you literally have Nazis and Ku Klux Klan people marching in the street, killing a woman who is a union member, to not speak up, to not have that moral compass and deliver the leadership at that moment, it sends a terrible message that I'm not going to defend over 50%. Let's be real. The Teamsters is a very diverse union that represents people, all genders, races, sexual orientations, and I loved it. It took real leadership to do that because we know, you did take a little bit of heat.
You caught some flack, yeah.
But for me, you're a real leader. You're somebody that's not tailing the worst sentiments of some of the members that are put out there by Wall Street or these propaganda news stations. You're giving the leadership that's based on labor history, how we won. Solidarity, uniting people. There's a long history of racism being used to divide workers, to defeat strikes. I mean, a lot of our listeners don't know that right to work was tied into segregation in the South and is a reason for some of the lowest union density and some of the highest percentages of anti-union state legislatures,
Well, yeah, I think moving forward, we obviously have a big fight on our hands. I guess kind of just as, do you have any parting comments here for us just about, the fight that's ahead of us, what we need to do here in the Teamsters?
Yeah, I want to give some of you guys some ideas about how I run my local union and how other people run their local unions. One of the things that I do not do is hire somebody because he's family, friend, or whatever. I always seek out the best guy that I think can do the job in that particular area. For instance, if I need somebody from UPS from the air hub, I seek out a steward, right? I've always got demand that he be a steward first because he's demonstrated that he knows the contract, that he has the ability to represent the people and all that stuff. And I seek out the best people to do that. I think I've got one of the best staffs in the country because of that, right? It's not a political thing. I always seek out the very best. You guys may know my communications guy, Stephen Piercy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Stephen Piercy does an incredible job communicating with the membership, which is such an important function of a local union to be able to communicate. No local unions have communication departments. If they are, they're less than 1%.
Yep.
I would suspect that Local 512 doesn't have a
No.
Definitely not.
communication
Absolutely
department,
not.
right?
No.
But what Stephen does is he works full-time every day just making sure that our membership is educated and that we communicate effectively so these people know what's going on that's affecting their lives every day.
Yep.
And he does a tremendously great job at that. But I think that every local union and even the international union should be doing that. They don't. The international union communications department, all they're doing is covering their butts every day.
Exactly.
Something's
No kidding.
going bad and they put out some kind of garbage to try to, CYA and
Yeah.
it's crazy stuff. But look, education of the membership, communication of the membership is some of the most important things that we do, other than the other things that we do, like representing, negotiating contracts, taking care of grievances, arbitrations, that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
But if you don't communicate with the membership, you're going to run into a scenario that we talked about just a few minutes ago.
Yep.
You did down in Local 79 when they got a contract, really didn't even know what it was. We just told, vote for it or don't vote for it. So what?
Exactly.
You know what? That's not education. If I tell you to vote for something, I'm going to give you all the reasons why I think you should vote for it, and that's the purpose a leader should take, right?
Exactly.
If I tell you not to vote for it, like we did in Louisville, we had some big no votes, and we voted no because they were educated.
Yes.
We went out there, we hand-billed, we communicated, we phone banked, we had our stewards contact the membership, we everything, and we said, this is bad for you, this is bad for you, this is bad for you. Vote no. If you vote yes and you get it, that's on you. Yep. So communication, education, some of my priorities, way up there.
And that's really everything. I mean, that's why a handful of us part-timers in Florida kick the ass of like 40 or so business agents all across the state.
You part-timers kick Ken Woods' ass right there at the gate. Who is he picking on?
He was picking on him. It was Dustin.
Yeah. He shoved me, but
no, he did. I saw it with my own two eyes.
But you know what's beautiful? I just heard tonight at the convention that his ass is retired now.
Oh, he better have gotten retired.
End of the year.
Yeah, he announced it at the last national meeting that December 31st is last.
Oh, it can't come soon enough, in my opinion.
It really can't. Well, listen, being up here at this TDU convention has been really, it's already been great. Tomorrow we have a full day of workshops. Fred, I understand you're actually headed out very early tomorrow morning. So we appreciate you doing this interview with us. Thank you so much for joining the Worker Power Hour, to do this interview. Obviously we supported your campaign a lot last year. And damn it, in 4 or 5 years, however long it takes, we'll be right there standing next to you again.
I appreciate it. You guys are great. I appreciate everything you do.
Welcome back, folks, to our post-game segment after that interview. And damn, Dustin, what an interview that was. What stood out to you the most hearing from Fred?
Well, Dave, to be honest, this is the kind of leadership Teamsters and union members need and deserve. We saw here at TDU, members are really inspired by leaders that are willing to organize, that are willing to strike, and that actually have some kind of vision and strategy for the future, which frankly, a lot of the trade union bureaucrats, folks like Jim Hoffa Jr. have not shown. And, I think it goes to show why Fred has one of the largest locals in America. I mean, this is a leader who has put, talented, young, and militant people in place in his local. And it shows because, he's got a local with almost 18,000 members.
No, I agree. I think it's really remarkable. And I mean, you just look at the times we're in. Next year, going into 2018, we have a major contract battle on our hands that frankly isn't just going to influence UPS workers. Every worker in America is going to feel the reverberations of the UPS contract and how that goes down. We've got a pension crisis on our hands. Amazon continues to grow into one of the largest monopoly corporations in America, and their rise has been completely unanswered by the trade unions in the United States. We've got Nazis marching in the streets. We've got, hurricanes in Puerto Rico. And Fred Zuckerman in this interview, I think, lays out a pretty comprehensive vision of what it means to be a union leader and a union militant in going into 2018. I don't know. I mean, I think there were a lot of great moments of it. I'm really honored to have been able to sit down with him.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it fulfilled kind of a personal dream ever since I think I met and talked to Fred at a TDU convention maybe a year or two ago. And his perspective on the use of the strike weapon, developing strike readiness, I was like, whoa, this is the guy. This is somebody that, embodies the leadership that I've been looking for and represents. So
I know it's a damn shame to think too that had in the East or even in Canada, had we just had a few more Teamsters turn out, Fred very well could be leading our union today. But I think honestly, though, it gets back to what Fred said, which is, we need to start as UPS Teamsters prepping this vote no movement. I mean, like right now, James Hoffa, the leadership of the Teamsters, they're not going to lead us to victory in this UPS contract. We, the members of this union, are going to have to take the lead if we want any hope of protecting our gains and being able to actually have a better future.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think that's what Fred distinctly understands is that you have to be a member-driven union. You do have to give leadership, and you have to be a good leader, but that involves education. It involves mobilization of the rank and file and trusting the rank and file, which, Hoffa hasn't shown that. Most of the AFL-CIO trade unions around the country are in a state of decline because they haven't recognized that fact.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I mean, even when we were talking in there about strikes and the need to prep for that, I mean, this is truly the way forward for organized labor. If you think about it, man, every major union in the United States, and especially the bureaucrats in D.C., these people want to try every solution in the book to get labor out of its crisis, except the one that actually needs to happen, the one that will actually work, which is to revive the strike weapon and to make sure that we actually can pose a credible strike threat to corporate America. And I think, I certainly know from talking to people here at this Teamsters convention, when we talked to Kaz earlier in the segment, people are ready for this. The question is one of leadership. And I think that's a really great aspect of having Fred on this program. I hope that people listen to what, he kind of laid out and internalize it, because the truth is we are all the leaders that we need in the Teamsters, and we've got to unite behind that message. I'm very optimistic moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a takeaway for our listeners, if you're a Teamster out there listening to this interview, get involved with Teamsters United. Get involved with building a militant caucus in your local, in your region, and come to the table ready to fight next year in our contract battle. And next election cycle, we hope to see you as a Teamsters United activist. If you're outside in another trade union, take a look at this. This is a model that can be built on. We need to be building fighting leadership, a fighting militant philosophy throughout all the trade unions in America, because we have a lot of power set on the table. It's just not being used, and there's a lack of solidarity. So we hope this interview kind of illustrated some of the most dynamic, kind of visionary work in the American union movement right now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and what a terrific interview. Folks, a couple points before we wrap up the show. We appreciate you all for listening, and we hope you'll join us for part 2 of our exclusive Worker Power Hour coverage of the Teamsters for a Democratic Union 2017 convention in Chicago. Next episode, we have a real barnstormer. We booked out incredible interview guests from Teamsters locals across the country. You're going to hear all sorts of issues addressed, not just kind of the bread and butter stuff you've heard on this show plenty of times about Amazon, about UPS, about the pension crisis. You're going to hear about what it's like for women to struggle in the workplace against sexism, what it's like for our black sisters and brothers to struggle against racism both in and outside the workplace. And you're going to hear about kind of what we need to do as a working class movement to actually move into this 21st century and reclaim power for working people. It is truly just a fantastic segment of interviews we got coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. These profile pieces we're doing, you're going to see the people on the ground all across the country that are fighting and working the muscle behind Fred's movement. And I think it's just as critical as talking to the leadership to see what's the boots on the ground and what they're doing. It's kind of a front lines profile piece of the Teamster movement as a whole. So we think you're really going to enjoy it. Please stay tuned. That should be out later in the week.
Absolutely. And so, just as always, you can subscribe and listen to the Worker Power Hour on the iTunes Store, the Google Play Music Store, as well as most podcasting apps. Dustin, what's the podcasting app that you use pretty regularly?
I like to use Podcast Addict. It's really easy if you got an Android phone like I do. You just download that, you hook it up to Wi-Fi, you search Worker Power Hour, and you can download any of the episodes so you have them ready to play at work. So if you're a Teamster out there, you got a Bluetooth device, you're driving over the road or working in the warehouse, just sit down before the work week, download a couple episodes of Worker Power Hour, and you're good to go for the week.
There you go. Well, folks, of course, you can always stream Worker Power Hour at WPHpodcast.com. Please make sure to like us on Facebook. Our page is just Worker Power Hour. And follow us on Twitter at Worker Power Hour, or shoot us an email and tell us what you think of the show, workerpowerhour@gmail.com. If you liked it, please know that we are a listener-driven broadcast. We are a worker-driven broadcast. Please make sure, share the show with your coworkers, your family, your friends, your neighbors, anybody who you think might like the content on this show, because we're bringing you that working class perspective of the news, the big issues of the day that affect working people that you quite literally will not get anywhere else on the net. So, as two rank-and-file working Teamsters, and by the way, for anybody who's curious, Christina will be rejoining us here after this TDU convention. We'll be back on to host the Worker Power Hour. We wish you the very best through the next work week. Union Power.
Union Power.
It's just a